Hey there, good afternoon. This is Lake Mendocino, a reservoir here in Mendocino County. I just played a game of disc golf, shooting for the second basket up that way. At least it's out of the wind here, you know, down in these trees. Just going to walk along here. You can see a few people around. Just gonna wander this way, show a little bit of the lovely countryside, and talk about how I got started traveling, the very beginnings of my world adventures. So I'm going to start with a childhood story that occurred south of here in Calistoga. I was raised in Willits, which is the next town about 20 minutes north of Ukiah there, in the woods outside of the small town there. A like classic kind of hippie back to the land upbringing. And so I was 8 years old. I was in second grade. This was summer of 1980, or actually it was spring of 1980. And I had a trip already set up with my aunt Chris, a 2-week camping road trip all over the West that was going to occur later that summer. But an unexpected traveling experience occurred, which is that I was in school. There was like a week left, and my Aunt Martha came driving down from further north. I don't know where she was visiting on this trip. She was like on a road trip, and she was going to be picking up her son, my cousin Nick, who is a year older than me. He is a musician in Portland, Oregon. Really a cool guy, and we were great friends, even though he lived in Los Angeles. So we would just see each other every once in a while. And so my Aunt Martha stopped at our house in Willits to visit my parents and me and my brother out in the woods. And in the course of that visit, then my parents came up with the idea of me doing a spontaneous trip with my Aunt Martha, stopping to pick up my cousin Nick, and then from there drive down to Los Angeles and have a vacation, whatever, there, and then also visit my grandparents. But there was a week of school left. However, my parents just arranged or whatever for me to miss that last week of school, and so we went for it. And like I got all packed up, and a couple days later, I remember actually I went to like one more day of class. My aunt was leaving in the middle of the day. Oh boy, I've run into a real marshland. Okay, let's maybe walk up over here. And so I remember saying goodbye to the class before the day was over, and then I got to miss like the next week, something like that. And so we drove down to my cousin Nick, who was going to, I think, probably a music school or some sort of a camp or something like that in the town of Calistoga. So we stop, and then my Aunt Martha and I come up with this idea to surprise my cousin, because he doesn't know yet about this because it's all spontaneous. And so I hide in the back seat, like under some jackets or something like that. My cousin Nick gets in the car and then says hi to Martha, and then I like pop out of the jacket, and my cousin is just completely surprised. And we just laughed for like 30 minutes or something straight. After we like got started driving, we were just like so stoked to see each other, and just the surprise was so perfect. So that began a summer of adventures. I went down to Los Angeles, and then I remember going over to Bishop, California, where my grandparents lived. And then later that same summer, then I did the 2-week trip with my Aunt Chris. We went to like something like 15 national parks and monuments in 14 days. So like every day hitting different national parks and monuments, and camping, mostly camping from what I remember along the way, like Grand Tetons and Crater Lake, maybe Yellowstone, I forget exactly, but all over the West. So that was kind of the beginning of my travelings. My family was fairly adventurous as well. We would go on like ski trips and camping trips, backpacking trips, stuff like that. But that was kind of probably my biggest adventure, this 2-week trip. Now, it was also around the same time that, okay, you know what I'm going to do, just for something a little different, is walk back up here and show the disc golf course, since I mentioned it. Show something that for those who aren't familiar with disc golf, then show what it looks like. And plus, it is a nice walk in the woods, and probably there won't be anybody else in there still. Now, the parking lot closed at 5, hoping that I don't get locked in. We'll see. And so it was around this time that I started hitchhiking. When I was a kid, it is possible that I came up with the idea from the camping trip with my aunt, and maybe I saw a hitchhiker on that trip, or probably a few of them, out with their thumb out on the side of the road, and probably asked my aunt, like, why is that guy standing there? And then she explained. So I lived in the woods, as I said, 5 miles outside of the town of Willits, up a winding road, and then you turned onto a dirt road. The first road, Sherwood Road, up through Brook Trails, was a paved road. You'd go like 3 or so miles up there, and the bus that I took every day after school, the school bus, would drop me off at the bottom of the dirt road. So I always had this very long walk, 1.5 miles or so, to get to our house, which sometimes I would get a ride with my parents, or some sort of a ride that was set up for us, but most often, very often, I was stuck walking. Neighbors would drive by sometimes, but they wouldn't necessarily stop and pick me up. But maybe sometimes they would, if they were neighbors that I knew especially well or something. But at some point, then I came up with the idea of, instead of walking at all, just wait for the next car to come along and try to hitchhike and see how it goes. So I would walk just a little ways up the dirt road, find a nice spot, take a seat, read a book, hang out, and hitch it. And that became a regular thing for me. Later, when I was older, like in high school, then I would oftentimes hitchhike home from the town of Willits if I was staying in a town with friends and missed the bus or whatever. And so here is a either campground or just a picnic day use area, but it looks pretty much like a campground, which I actually didn't realize was here, even though I'm parked right over there, and the disc golf course is back in here. So my next bigger adventure was my friend Abram and I hitchhiked up to Garberville just for a day, like on the weekend, or maybe we kind of skipped school or something, I forget. But then later we did a hitchhiking adventure over to Fort Bragg for the night, slept on the beach, and then hitchhiked back the next day. And then I moved when I was 15 in the summer between 9th and 10th grade. I had gone to the high school, but I had skipped 7th grade because Abram had skipped, I think, 6th grade. And so I skipped a grade partly to be in the same class as him again. And then my parents divorced, and my dad moved down to the Bay Area, and I moved down with my dad and brother to Oakland. Went to Skyline High School. Tom Hanks graduated from Skyline High School. And then I was kind of in with a little bit of a sketchy crowd there, and my dad wanted me to change schools just to kind of get me out of that scene. And he arranged for me to go to Berkeley High School. And so I started going there, even though we were living in Oakland. And I would take various buses in the morning to get over there. And then I graduated from Berkeley High School in 1989. And then after that, then I moved up to Ukiah here, where my mom was living, and I lived with her for the fall semester of 1989 and went to the Mendocino Community College for a semester. But I was just kind of done with school after, I guess, 12 and a half years of it or whatever. And I had the traveling bug at that point. I think in large part because I was a voracious reader, would read books like crazy all through my childhood, and I think that probably had a big influence in getting me interested in seeing more of the world, plus my camping road trip with my aunt, plus my parents had done a hitchhiking trip in Europe in, I think, 1970, before I was born, 6 weeks in the United Kingdom, I think Ireland, and then over maybe Netherlands, Germany, something like that, and had told stories. A funny story from their adventures. They were traveling with another couple. Oh, I just passed a couple of the, there's the shooting tee-off point. You shoot up there, basket up there. I will show another one more close, but here's one right here. So it has these chains on it, and then you shoot and get it to land in that little basket. I'll show some more over here. Okay, I can see that the guy has the road closed sign for the parking lot, but it is not closed all the way, so it looks like I am good. I think it is before 5 still. And so my parents were somewhere in the north of England, or at least north of London, and needed to hitchhike back to London, but because they were a couple of couples, then they thought that it would be better for them to split up and hitchhike as 2 pairs instead of 4 people. Obviously, makes sense. So they said, okay, we'll meet at this pub in London, I guess that they had been to before. So here you see, this is the third basket. And so they arranged to meet at this pub in London that they had been to before, I think, later that day. So they split up, start hitchhiking. And so the pub is on a corner of a block. My parents come walking down the sidewalk up to the entrance to the pub, and right at that exact moment, then the other couple walks from the other direction, like practically runs into them right there at the exact same time after like several hours of hitchhiking, something like that. Pretty cool. So based on all these various factors, then I decided that I wanted to take off after this semester at Mendocino Community College here in Ukiah and go for a big summer adventure. The semester at the college there ended in January rather than like, you know, middle of December. So I stuck it out to the end of the semester in January. And then I moved back down to Oakland. My dad was living in the same house there with my stepmom and my brother. I looked for a job there to make some money and start getting ready for a big adventure in Europe that summer. Now, I was still 17 because, as I mentioned, I skipped a grade. So I graduated right after turning 17. And it was best to wait until I was 18. Plus, of course, better for the summer to roll around. All right, back where I started, I'll walk down and show the edge of the lake, what it's looking like there. So I booked my flight for the day after I turned 18 to London, with a return flight almost 4 months later in August. And so I arrive in London in May,